But what we will be talking about is the WNBA.
Thank the Lord.
So,
Now, here is the question that we have posed earlier today. We're going to have a little discussion now.
hold on, wait a
Now,
minute. Oh, before you continue, where you at? There you go.
we asked this question earlier, and if you have didn't catch it, here it is again. The episode question of the day: has the increased scrutiny surrounding the WNBA been good or bad for the league's growth? And if you didn't hear it the first time, we want to see that answer underneath the description box below if you're watching on the Playmakers Network YouTube channel. And again, if you haven't done it already, like this video, share this video, and subscribe to the Playmakers Network YouTube channel. What direction should I go in?
You have the article. I just have the pictures.
It's just, I'm at a loss from the standpoint of I don't know how I want to really attack this.
WA is on the microscope, which is true. Is the
Yeah,
scrutiny the price of success? Because the growth of the league, you got more attention. Everywhere you turn, there's some type of criticism taking over the league and not the play on the court. Except for this past weekend, for once.
but the thing is, I hate to say it like this. Normally, when any type of business gets this type of scrutiny, it normally is a good thing because it means that there's more attention brought to the league in this case or the company. There is more. There's more writing on the moves that are being made, and it normally means that the level of play in this case has increased. Otherwise, people really wouldn't care about the WNBA at all.
Which brings me to one of our favorite coaches. No, she does not coach in the WNBA. She does coach in a sport that we do love, though.
Yes, that would be one Dawn Staley.
Now, this quote here is just the big quote from the entire quote. I'm gonna show you the entire quote here, though, on the next slide.
Yeah, now during the weekend in the Hall of Fame weekend, the WBA received some attention, and this question was posed. Just thinking about it with the league's greatest icons being enshrined. Now, the ongoing vitriol centered on race, gender, and sexuality, which is making for headlines daily and making Playmakers' head hurt. The controversy is also being a part of an undertone of how the WNBA is being covered, and of course the physicality of the league and the fouls that are being called or not called that has come into play with the women's evolution. All of that has somewhat overshadowed the impressive play, which has been seen in its 30th year of the WNBA, which gets us to the Hall of Famer. And yes, we do have to call her that. The Hall of Famer, Dawn Staley, because she's getting inducted yet again. And congratulations to you on receiving another honor in the Hall of Fame, Dawn. Now, she was posed this question, and she said that there's some similar parallels between what the WNBA is going through and what the NBA experienced back in the 70s and 80s. quote, all the big pieces and all the things that are happening from from a racial standpoint, from an officiating standpoint, are great. They're great because the NBA went through it. The NBA went through all of it. So this is just badges of honor. Will we get through it? We'll get through it. Close quote. I love the badges of honor uh, point. Now, for those who aren't aware of the NBA's history, Dawn's aware of it because she's maybe like a couple of years older than I am. So we're in around the same generation. So she saw what I saw. She saw a league in the 70s that was controversial and maligned for a lot of stuff, and it was marred by black versus white, and not just skin color, but by play, by style of play. If you were, if you're white, you basically were, team oriented. If you were black, you played playground style, or and one if you're younger.
Street
And
ball.
so you or street ball. So you had that dynamic in the 70s, along with an amphetamines run where it almost marred the league to the point where we would not be talking about the NBA. Teams were ready to fold. The league
Was
was ready to go belly up.
was that around the time Workers Park became Workers Park?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Was that around the time when Workers Park they started becoming Workers Park up in New York?
No, Rucker Park was big before then. But you had Dr. J, who actually is a New Yorker. Uh, he basically would sell out Rucker Park. You had people watching from the rooftops of park projects and on tree branches, watching him play, and we're talking like late 60s, early to mid 70s. So Rucker Park was Rucker Park before the downturn of the NBA. Um, but also, and we're seeing it now, what helped the league actually turn the corner? Race. Yeah. You had the Celtics with Larry Bird. You had the Lakers with Magic Johnson. They matched up in the national championship game in 1979. They got drafted. A couple of months later to their respective teams, and in a couple of years, each of them took turns winning a championship, but the league just wasn't all the way happy with how the product was coming, and so the league bet up with CBS, and they said, "All right, let's do this." And this started in 1983. So yeah, let's do this. Let's televise on Sunday 2 games, and in the 12 o'clock spot would be the Celtics. The 2:30 spot will be the Lakers. So we'll get a chance to see Bird and Magic every single Sunday unless they matched up against each other. And so you got to understand this league, the NBA, and this is the advantage the WBA has. Playoff games, even the finals, were tape delayed. I'll say that again. The playoffs and the finals were tape delayed. It meant that you had to wait until your 10, in my case, since I live in Houston, o'clock news, or in Playmaker's case, the 11 o'clock news went off the air. And you wouldn't be able to see anything NBA worthy on CBS until 10:35 or 11:35 Eastern. 10:35 Central, 11:35 Eastern. That was how it was rolling. And it rolled even when Bird and Magic were in the league. They stopped that in 1983. Then the very next year, you had the Lakers and the Celtics meet up in the NBA Finals or the NBA Championship Series, as that's what it was called then. And to this day, Game 7 is the most watched NBA game of all time. To this day, 42 years later, to this day, the most watched game the NBA has ever produced in the history of its league. And they haven't been able to look back ever since. They took off then, and it was, more success with Magic and Bird, then Jordan, then the Showtime Lakers, then LeBron, then Steph. And the league didn't have any money issues then. But there was a time where the NBA was almost no more. And so to bring the conversation, the breadth and the depth necessary, when Dawn Staley was mentioning, the NBA went through all of those bumps, the racial, the officiating, because there was there were even some, and we've had this happen as recently as a few years ago. Referees on the take, referees being biased. So you had that then there as well. But to Dawn's bigger point, and this is what I think she was trying to say to the WNBA, motivational to the players, obviously, is that, you're going to run into some hiccups because more eyes are going to be on you. More scrutiny is going to be in your direction because you're still going to have these fans who's going to look at the product and say, I don't want to watch this because these girls don't dunk. Just some stupid crap like that. Just bypass the more fundamentally sound game that the women just play through osmosis. I mean, they are more fundamentally sound than the men are. And that there is no debate. And I have seen the NBA ever since I was 7 years of age. The brand of basketball the women play are far more fundamentally sound than the brand the men play. The men, they rely on the athleticism. And yes, there's athleticism with the WNBA and with the women's game. But you could tell fundamentals is where they live and breathe. So
what's fundamentals? What is that? What's fundamentals?
Fundamentals like making the extra pass, um, like taking advantage of the shot clock, uh, like making sure the open woman in this case gets fed the ball, like post play, which that is almost a non-existent theme in the NBA. You still have that in the WNBA, and you still have it in the college game too. You have where threes are not being taken every other shot. There actually is something called there's something called a mid-range game on offense. And there is team defense that for the most part is embraced.
Golden State
So,
Packers.
yeah, a team that if you score 70 points, you better throw a party. All of those pieces come together, and the NBA didn't have that back when they were going through their doldrums and abysmal play. Yeah, you had great defenders, and you had great defensive teams, but it was the athleticism that really was getting them through, and the style of play that the WNBA does play. You had a little bit more of that in the NBA, and you had a lot of people checking out of the game. And I'm talking about players, I mean stands. People watching the game just straight up checked out because it just wasn't entertaining enough. And that game needed to have above the rim play. They needed to have no look passes. They needed to have faster break plays because they were competing with games like football and basketball and hockey that if the NBA isn't running as fast as they could, But that game would be even more boring than hockey, basketball, hockey, baseball, and football. But having a team like the Showtime Lakers, well, problem solved. The thing is, the NBA actually is profiting now, and they're getting the scrutiny. When Magic and Bird were coming to the league, the money was just being poured. There was some sort of sieve. They were leaking money. It was just draining. Stands, people in stands weren't watching the game. People weren't watching the game on TV, and it just wasn't a good product at all to watch. And I remember when I was young, it just wasn't a good product to watch. Hence why you need to have the ABA. And this is also something you need to take heed of in WNBA. You need to have the ABA infuse itself into the NBA to make the game more exciting. Like the dunk contest, like a 3-point line, like playing above the rim. Other than, players like Bill Russell, Will Chamberlain, who had the height to play above the rim, most didn't. So you don't need that in the WNBA because people are coming in to see the brand they play now. And I love seeing that. Now, what the NBA had to deal with was who could play in the league. In the 40s, it was an all-white league. And they didn't want to integrate. It was a hardcore resistance to do so. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can take Bill Russell's word for it when he was amassing championship after championship in Boston. And he said that Boston Garden was half filled during the finals. But a team that struggled mightily like the Bruins to win a Stanley Cup, the Boston Garden was sold out. Why? Because the hockey players were all white. And there was just a little bit too much blackness on the Celtics. He said, dealing with, racism with the fans, the city government, the people who were there, and the media that was there. Oh, it was a wonderful experience for him. And that came from the late, great Bill Russell, who should be considered one of the greatest icons in Celtics history, let alone the NBA history. But he's not. And you want to know what it led to? It led to him performing a retirement jersey ceremony with an empty stadium at his request. So that's the stench racism had on the NBA, and it was that pervasive. And so they needed a guy who was happy-go-lucky and smart and bubbly and effervescent, like a Magic Johnson, who also so happened to be black, so that people can rally around him, black and white, and say, I like him. And you still had people who wanted to rally around Bird too, because he's just one well of a player. Now, these polarizing views on these kinds of matters, to the Playmakerz' chagrin, it has become more and more topic du jour. WNBA players have commented on it. The union president, Nneka Ogwumike. Now, she said that she feels awful for the transgender fan who have supported the league for so many years. She said, quote, "It breaks my heart to think about how these conversations may be affecting people who have supported us for so long." Close quote. Now, she went on to say that WNBA players, they have used their platform to engage in social political discussions, but she believes that there's an underlying agenda off the court with the questions that the media asks, which I fully agree with that. She said, quote, "It's super unfortunate because we're now in a time where I think there's a lot of different agendas being used for something perhaps bigger and broader that people can't see now, that they're using women's sports for. It's very concerning. But what I really do hate is that we are using a very nuanced conversation, an evolving conversation, to continue to marginalize these groups that we advocate for." Close quote. And I think what Nneka is wise enough to understand is, I think, what people at large are not. There is a balance that mainstream media has and the players have to see, and social media. And it's now almost getting to the point where people are, and I'm saying this being a member of the news and national media, being a member of one of the biggest in national media in the United States. People are actually thinking that they're now blending one in the same. And I can tell you that it's not, but people are going to think they're married still. She went on to say about that part, quote, "Even something as simple as you guys asking actual basketball questions, uh, I think it's very helpful. I think it's a very delicate line for me, because it's like, okay, you know, we want to act like your job is to cover this game, and our job as athletes is to play it and to also give you what we can. But then it's also like, do I want to seem insensitive by not talking about the things that are going on?" Close quote. And that is the danger that these players run into. And I think that's the issue that those like Sophie Cunningham and Caitlin Clark have run into. Not because they're white, but because they actually are vocalizing what they feel. And you're having people say, definitely with in Sophie's case, well, you just don't feel for the transgender person. You're insensitive. You're you're a troll. You're horrible. You're a crabby human being. Online and in the media, people are saying those types of things to Sophie Cunningham, and all she said simply was, quote, "Anybody who was born a male should not play women's sports." Close quote. Saying to me something as simple as that has made this a fireball controversy, where you tie politics with society and political science and culture and morality, all because she made a point that, in my opinion, and that in Playmaker's opinion, is very valid. Why would you want a male? Why would you want someone who was born a male, and probably someone who still is a male, participate in anything that women do? To a lesser degree, would you want someone who's born a female coming to a man's league? No. So I don't see the problem. I don't see the civil rights problem, which that's the knock. I don't see the civil rights problem. I'm like, there's proof. Riley Thomas, swimmer. He, she, whatever you want to call him or her. When he decided to make himself a male, he was coming in last in meets. He decided to become a female, and all of a sudden he was breaking NCAA records left and right. And Sophie was calling that type of abuse out, and she gets castigated by those who think that she's being insensitive and inhuman. Now, Coach Staley, she agrees that it's unfortunate that all great things happening on the court are seemingly being pushed to the back of the room in discussions like these. And she went on to say, quote, "It's an incredible product that we're missing out on because we got distractions every time. There's something great happening. There are always distractions placed in your life, but you got to be able to handle them." Close quote. And, congratulations, WNBA. There are more eyeballs on your product. Viewership is now 17% higher than last season. And last season was a record setting year. Attendance is strong again. And this is what I was saying earlier. The attention is good, but not all of it is good. Now, as the WNBA continues to grow in popularity, you got these social media attacks that I was mentioning earlier that's directed at players, and that has increased. Also, what's increased is betting on the game, betting on the sport. Newly minted Hall of Famer Candace Parker, she had this to say about the personal attacks and the threatening comments that are directed at players. Quote, "It was more swept under the rug in the past, but now it's not because you can't. We can't tell every player to just deal with it. That's just not how it works. I know I'm proud that some people think that they're anonymous when they make comments online, and they're finding out that they're not. And there are going to be repercussions. Unfortunately, that's the climate in our country right now, to be honest with you. And I think women always feel it more, and it's always been that way from top to bottom." Close quote. Fellow inductee for this year in the Hall of Fame, Shamika Hosklaw. Now, she said that she had disagreements with teammates during her WNBA stint from 1999 to 2010, but those were kept private and not brought out on social media, which then was in its infancy. She had this to say about that. Quote, "I've had teammates that I may not agree with their politics or beliefs, but we all know that as long as the locker room is good, we're good." Close quote. Here's the issue. Not I don't have an issue with what Shamiqua said, but here's the other angle of this, Shamiqua. We now have people, and I will say this: we have people who are in social media, and we have people in the national media who they're getting their run and they're getting their shine because they could get into the locker room and get the tidbit and the tea. You know, oh, who's she dating? Who she's engaged to? Who she's marrying? Is she straight or is she gay? Um, what's her stance on Trump? Um, I mean, is she monogamous or she believe in polyamory? I mean, you got people who want to dig that deep into the locker room now, who are media credentialed. Some are, and that is the problem that these athletes today are experiencing. And so it now gets to the point where some have to keep their mouth shut and they want to not give any of us anything but what we see on the court. And I can tell you from watching other sports, Art Monk from the NFL comes to mind. Eddie Murray from Major League Baseball comes to mind. And to a degree, Barry Bonds from MLB as well. But definitely Murray and Monk. They had the reputation that they were not good interviews. And then unfortunately, it's stained a little bit them, but it really wasn't they were bad interviews. Like, it wasn't that they weren't forthcoming, or they weren't intelligent, or they weren't gregarious, or you didn't get anything from them. It was they, for lack of a better term, they got early in their career, and they were like, okay, well, I'm going to limit what I say to the media, and if that means that I'm going to be called snarky, or irascible, or difficult, then so be it. And I think we're probably going to start seeing more and more players, both in the WNBA realm and in the NBA realm, be that way. And I think that is what the issue is going to be. And I think that's the issue that we're facing now. What is considered good for us, the paying public, the watching, the viewing public, to consume for news? Is the private life of these players up for grabs? And if it's not from that certain player telling us who she's dating, who she's not dating, how she's dating, if she's getting married, if she's having a baby, if she decides, well, no, I'm not going to disclose all of that, I'm going to be private, then it's up to us to respect those women's wishes. But considering that you now have Caitlin Clark, who, whenever she talks about racism, people want to basically be like E.F. Hutton. And for those who, and talk about that, Gen Xers, those who get the reference, you get it. For those who don't, there was a commercial in the early to mid 80s with this guy named John Houseman, who I think was a Harvard professor, but he turned actor and got hugely popular at the time. And so I think it was Smith Barney, I think. And so, yeah, he would say, Smith Barney, we make money the old fashioned way. We earn it. And with that, I think you're starting to see people understand that these players want us to earn what we understand, earn what we can ascertain for information, earn the respect from them, because they have to earn our respect for the play they put forth on the court. And so now you're having these players who are intelligent, but as I said, Caitlin pays a huge price every time she speaks, because there's going to be somebody that's going to disagree with whatever she puts forth on a mic. So yes, with the fouls being uneven, with the game being, I won't say too physical, but with the game being physical, with, and I hate calling it political because the subject matter is not political, with the cultural powder keg that exists, whether it is race, whether it is gender, whether it is being transgender. People want to know what these players think. And what does make it political is, it now is, if definitely with racism and transgenderism, if you believe a man a male can play in the WBA, then you represent the jackass. If you believe they don't, you represent the elephant. If you believe that the league is too black and too chocolate, then you're a Magite. You're a Magaite, and you represent the elephant again. If you love the fact that it's Chocolate City in the WNBA, then you represent the jackass again. The problem is that this is not about political affiliation. And if you want to know what is dragging down this type of topic, it is that. It's the fact that you have political affiliations tied to cultural phenomena. And that is what's happening today. And it makes the climate for coaches and players, especially in the WNBA, much more difficult. The water's murkier. The landmines more prevalent when you have these issues all the time, having to be rearing its ugly head. And when a mic is shoved in their mouth, they have to watch what they say. Not because they don't believe what they say, not because they don't want to give forth what they feel, but they now have to think, what's the backlash that's going to occur with what comes out of my mouth. And unfortunately, you're going to see more scrutiny because of that. And that's tied on top of bad officiating. An, an ownership group that basically is persona non grata, and a commissioner that is MIA. So enjoy the fruits of your growth, WNBA, but you have to deal with the added pressure that comes with proving proof of concept. This is the second year in a row, I believe, you're making money. You're making a profit. I mean, Magic Johnson actually said, I've owned the Sparks for 10 years. Haven't made a dime. So you have impetus to prove people wrong, even those who love basketball, like Magic Johnson. You can prove that this game is profitable and that you all can have these wonderful takes and that you are dealing with the fact that refereeing and officiating is absolute hot garbage and that you have a fundamentally sound game where you don't need to play above the rim in order to draw 15, 16, 17, 18, 19,000 people to see you at one time. Your game is good. And at the precipice of what really matters the most, you have no issue at all. The product on the court can't be much better. And I'm only talking about from the player's standpoint. Obviously, the officiating can improve, but the play on the court, stellar. And it's getting better by the year. Hold that to account. And everything else, it will have to revolve around the success of what you put forth on the deck.